Grace and peace to you. This is our adult faith formation for the season of Epiphany. And in it, we're going to take a question for the day, a faith question, a theology question, whatever that is. And myself, Rebecca, will wrestle with that a little bit. I'm not saying we're necessarily answering the questions, but we're wrestling with them. Sometimes there aren't great answers. Sometimes we don't know the answers. But I think one of the great things about a community of faith is the ability to wrestle with those things together. So that's what we're going to do here. We invite you to not let the conversation end here. If there's some things that come to mind for you, reach out to Becca or myself and ask that question of us, or you can comment on the Facebook post that includes this video, and we can see if there's some conversation or some kind of holy wondering that happens together. The question for today is one that someone posed recently to me, and the question is, was Jesus perfect? It's a great question. It's a hard question. The first thing I'll say pretty clearly is that while we might disagree on whether or not Jesus was perfect and what that really means, we certainly would say that Jesus is without sin. That is a doctrine of the church that happened early on through councils that was agreed upon, and that was fought over. There were a lot of arguments made on either side of that, but we say that Jesus was without sin, and so that one I won't really wrestle with here about whether Jesus was without sin or not. The church says that's true, and I'm going to stick to that. The idea of perfect is an interesting one, and what that brings to mind for me is how we say that Jesus is fully divine and fully human. And so the funny thing for us is that as humans, we actually, we seem to wrestle with the idea of Jesus as divine a little less than we do with Jesus as human. People seem, within the church at least, seem to not really be bothered with the idea of Jesus having some amount of divine knowledge, whether that means Jesus knows what's going to happen to him in his ministry, or that Jesus has a certain awareness about what he's doing or what's going on in the world. We don't seem to struggle with that too much, at least in my experience. Where we seem to struggle a little bit more is with the idea of Jesus as fully human, and that what that really means. Jesus certainly was born a baby, and a baby doesn't come into the world with clear ideas about what life is going to look like, or sense of identity or any of that. A baby really relies on parents to take care of him or her, and then has to learn and grow. And so Jesus, as fully human, had to learn and grow. And with that probably comes making mistakes. I don't think I would call making mistakes in the process of growing and developing the same thing as sin. So I think Jesus could have made mistakes as Jesus grew up and learned and developed. And so I think that's possible. I wouldn't necessarily call that as being imperfect. I think it's actually a beautiful thing as kids learn and grow and kind of make those mistakes and learn from them. That's beautiful when an adult's able to do that too. So I don't think that's being imperfect necessarily, but some might say so. But I think Jesus went through that. Jesus certainly had to learn and grow. It was probably a mistake that Jesus didn't tell his parents that he was still at the temple as they were leaving Jerusalem and left him there for a couple days. His parents probably would call that a mistake. So some of those things probably happened. I don't think that's the same thing as being sinful, but maybe imperfect in that sense, depending on how you define it. Even in his ministry, Jesus seemed to learn and grow some, and that troubles some people. But I think about when the Samaritan woman comes begging Jesus for a piece of the kingdom, and at first he seems to turn her away, and Jesus's view of who he was coming to bring the kingdom for at that point was for the Jews. And it seems like in that gospel and that story that this woman really helped Jesus to learn and grow and realize, discern that the ministry that he was bringing, the kingdom that he was ushering into the world, was for everyone, was for the whole world, not just the Jews. And so, so I think Jesus certainly learned and grew, and that's part of being human. And so I don't think that's the same thing as being imperfect, but some might. So that's my take on it, on whether Jesus was perfect or not. It's not necessarily an answer, but it's some thoughts for you. And if this spurred some questions for you or some interesting thoughts, feel free to reach out and let us know, or comment on the Facebook page, and we can keep the conversation going. And we'll see what comes up for next week. God's peace to you. Bye.